Hey guys, hello. Welcome back. I am not reacting to anything today. I'm just reviewing a movie I saw yesterday with a couple of family members. I watched The Odyssey in theaters. I was going to try to hold off and watch that on the channel with you guys, but the opportunity came up because one of those family members had a birthday and he wanted to go watch that movie for his birthday, and I couldn't resist because the moment I saw that trailer, it looked pretty crazy and fantastic to me, and I've always been interested in Greek mythology and particularly the story of Odysseus. And yeah, while I haven't read the whole thing and I've only read snippets and learned things from pop culture, this is, I would say, my first complete exposure to his story. And I know there were some adjustments that Sir Chris Nolan made to the story, but yeah, I gotta say, I was completely spellbound when I came out. So I'm gonna start off with, of course, a non-spoiler review, and then I'm gonna get into the spoiler section. And do not worry, I will let you guys know before I start talking about spoilery stuff. But I watched it yesterday, and it gave me some time to think through some things. Because as you come out of a movie, sometimes you feel a little more hyped up about things than you do the next day or so. Because I did come out completely hyped up, even though the little clip I put letting you guys know I was going to make this may not have seemed like I was. I was just trying to keep it on a down low because there was like a lot of people around and I didn't want to look dumb recording or whatever. But yeah, we all agreed, all three of us who watched this movie yesterday, that it is really a work of art in every aspect. Right down from the script and the writing to the setting of every location and just the way it looked, the music, the costuming. I'll get into that a little bit because I know there's some discrepancies on the costuming, and yeah, the acting, everything, every aspect of this movie was completely amazing. Where do I start? I guess I can start through something pretty simple. The aesthetics of the costuming was very interesting, and I know, historians and people who are far more knowledgeable in Greek mythology and whatever will say, oh, it's not historically accurate, but we have to remind ourselves that the story of Odysseus and all these stories are fictional. While they are based on real Greek traditions and things, they are nonetheless still mythology and fictitious. So when a director like Christopher Nolan, or any director really, picks up a story like this, they have a right artistically to adapt certain things, while it's respectful to not steer too far from the main story and the essence of the story. They are entitled to take some liberties. And I think the costuming was chosen in a way to enhance certain characters. Like, I don't want to get too much into the spoiler section, but somebody who was already seen in the trailers, Agamemnon, right? That is not a traditional Greek attire, but it did give him such an imposing demeanor and an imposing presence, really, among everyone else around him. It just made him feel like, and the actor didn't really pull his helmet off at all. We got, what is the actor's name? Benny Safdie. We didn't see his face at all. He never had his face exposed to the camera, and 90% of the time he had his helmet on. So you really don't see his face much, but you feel his presence through the way he walks, the way everyone behaves around him, and his attire, his costume made him scary almost, mostly imposing character, as I said. Choices like that, the choices to make, I'd say, everyone in Ithaca's attire very simple, non-distinguishable from everyone else other than Penelope. I'd say Penelope and Telemachus, played by Anne Hathaway and Tom Holland, and Robert Pattinson's character, Antinous, I think his name is pronounced. Yeah. I'm not going to pretend that I know how to pronounce all of these names. In fact, yesterday my nephew got on my case because I said Telemachus instead of Telemachus. I always do that. Anyway, there were certain characters that stood out. Of course, Zendaya as Athena, and these are things that I'm not spoiling because these are all people you saw in the trailers, and I'm assuming if you're heading out to watch this movie, you haven't seen it yet, these are things that you are familiar with, and you know who Athena is, and you've already looked into the casting a little bit. And of course, Matt Damon stands out at some moments, especially in the beginning. The attires of the Trojans were very different from Odysseus and his men and Agamemnon and his men. I'd say that's pretty much all I can cover right now when it comes to the costuming. The set design, clearly Christopher Nolan picked certain locations that would, become characters in their own right throughout the movie, because really every place, the backdrop for Circe, for Calypso, Ithaca itself. Let me see. I don't want to spoil things that haven't been in the trailer. Yeah. So every single moment that you experience, even the cave of Polyphemus, yeah, they all become their own character. It was just fantastic to look at. And throughout the movie, I had this thought in the back of my mind that I was like, I am so glad, honestly. Like, at one point, I thought about watching it here on the channel, but I was really grateful that I got the chance to go see this with my family, a couple family members, because I was like, this looks so incredible on the big screen. And of course, you're entitled to wait for it to come out on streaming services if you want, but if you can get to a movie theater, this is honestly one of those movies where you should see on a big screen, because there's other movies that I've wanted to watch, but I haven't had a chance to make it to a movie theater every single time. But I am so glad, so grateful, like I said, that I did get to see this on the big screen, because it looked and sounded incredible. The sound design was just on point. I'd say every single actor that was cast and thoughtfully picked by Christopher Nolan and the casting team, great job, because everyone did an incredible fucking job. Every single person who had an important role and had a moment. Elliot Page, I'm gonna talk about him later on. He was fucking fantastic. Anne Hathaway, Matt Damon, Tom, Robert, they all killed it in their part. John Leguizamo, his moments, they're all just top-notch actors, man. And they were picked for a reason, and they fucking killed it. And then not just the sound design, but the music. I know the music for Odyssey, and it's upsetting me right now that I even have to fucking look for his name, because I know he's made music for other movies that I absolutely fucking love. And I even downloaded the whole album last night, guys. I just don't want to get his name wrong. Ludwig Göransson. Yes. Yeah, I gotta look up other music, because I know he's done other music that I love. But yes, the music throughout has been, I'm pretty sure he's worked on other shit for Christopher Nolan, because he's usually very attached to certain... Okay, I have not watched Sinners yet. I will watch that on the channel. See Oppenheimer. He's worked on Tenet, on Black Panther, of course, Mandalorian and Grogu, yeah, Creed, Venom, Creed 2, I haven't seen that. There was something else he worked on that, yeah, maybe I'm wrong. But anyway, yeah, Christopher Nolan clearly picked him for a reason, because the music was also a character of its own. There were just certain moments in the movie where there was like build up towards a certain event. Talk about it in spoilers, of course. That the pacing just kept picking up, and it made you kind of like clench in your seat because you were so fucking nervous with what was about to happen, and the music was just hyping it up even more. So yeah, the music was just as important as every other artistic aspect of the movie. Yeah, fucking fantastic from start to finish. The movie was supposedly 3 hours long. I think it was actually exactly 2 hours and 50 minutes long, but it just didn't feel like that. Yeah, let me look at it. Yeah, see, it's 2 hours and 50 minutes, 52 minutes long to be exact. But yeah, I was so immersed in the story the whole entire time that I was like, this didn't feel like an almost 3 hour movie. Yeah, I think that's about all I can cover in the non-spoiler section without me spoiling anything very important for you guys. So anyway, I'll step into the spoiler stuff because I really do want to talk about certain moments that really stayed with me. Yeah, anyway, if you don't want to get spoiled and you're going to go see the movie yourself or you want to wait for streaming, yeah, here's the time to turn off. 3, 2, 1, go. Matt Damon. What can I say about the guy? You know, he's not somebody that I would have thought would be ever cast as Odysseus, to be honest with you. I don't know who I would have cast. I don't pretend to think I'm an expert at that. He was not somebody that I would have thought of. And my God, not only is the man in incredible shape, just the tone throughout the movie, he was just so, he was such a leader, but at the same time there was a humility to him that was heartwarming. And even though throughout the movie he makes some serious mistakes that he clearly pays for them later on, those moments where he humbles himself, I think, were his strongest moments. And yeah, there were, like, you know, these epic battle scenes where he was, you know, a badass, a boss, and just incredibly fucking cool in the choreography and just killing it and just looking fantastic. I think his best moments were the intimate moments he had throughout with Athena, with Zendaya, who killed it herself, of course. The connections they had without even looking at each other, because clearly for most of his interaction with her, he's embarrassed to look at her. And then his interactions in the beginning and at the end with Anne Hathaway as, you know, Penelope were really, really beautiful and so intense. And the man can express so much through his eyes just as well as Anne. Anne Hathaway is on another level. The emotion in her eyes and the moments when her voice breaks and the fear on her face when she's weaving the shawl that was supposed to be for her father, and she keeps undoing it just so she can make more time and not have to remarry. The clear fear on her face and trying to trick the suitors. She's just so good at what she does. I've seen quite a few movies of hers, but dare I say this might be her best one, honestly. And I've seen a lot of Matt Damon movies too, and he's been amazing in all of them, all the way down from Good Will Hunting to this one. There's a ton of movies that I've loved him in, but this might be one of my favorites, honestly, of his. Also, Tom Holland, another person that I would have never thought of as Odysseus' son. But, you know, I'd say the cast in general, I would have never pictured them in these roles, but there was just something about how they coexisted and the chemistry between them and the way they held their own in their roles. You could just see what class actors they are. You know, of course, you know, we all love Tom as Spider-Man, and he's been like great in a lot of other things that he's done, but yeah, this is you know, for me, probably his best role. I am looking forward to the new Spider-Man movie coming out with him and Zendaya, but there's just certain moments, like the moment, for instance, where he realizes that his father's back, and that moment with the dog, that made me cry. Because I was just talking about this with my sister. I knew that when Odysseus came back, the dog was going to die. That the dog was basically holding out until his master came home. He was in so much pain, physical pain, excruciating pain, and then these idiot suitors were like kicking him under the table. Oh God, that made me so angry. There's nothing I hate more than animal abuse and child abuse, and abuse to the elderly. Like, people abusing vulnerable people and creatures like that who just, an innocent, who pets just want to share their love and their affection and their companionship with you. And then for them to do that, and he was going through all that pain and suffering, but he waited and waited and waited until Odysseus touched him, and then he died. Yeah, that fucking broke me. And then Telemachus seeing that moment and realizing that's his father, and realizing that he can't give away his identity because there's something else going on that Odysseus wants to do, right? Show up as a beggar and see what's really going on. That's probably like one of my favorite moments of the movie, other than him speaking to, because that brings, I'm just like going through the movie in my head. I'm sorry things aren't in order, but I'm just talking about the moments that stood out to me. When he's in hell, basically in Hades' realm, talking to, although I feel like that was a bit of a purgatory. I don't think it was hell. I think it was kind of that, like, entrance to hell. Maybe all the warriors were heading to hell because of what they did in Troy, but that's sure a lot of people Hades got kind of thanks to Odysseus, right? And Agamemnon. But that piece of advice that Agamemnon gave Odysseus was so valuable. It's not what happened in Troy, it's what happened later on when I was greeted when I got home by my wife, who turned out to be Clytemnestra, not Helen. And she had taken Helen's place, I take it, because I think in the like I said, I haven't read the book, so I'm not sure how that works. I wasn't aware that she had an identical twin that had taken her place. But yeah, clearly they take it out on Helen later on, and go for her face and make her look awful later on, because she has that horrid scar on the left side of her face that Menelaus shows Telemachus when he's seeking for advice on whether his father's alive or not. But anyway, that moment, when he's greeted by everyone, and then she takes the time to get intimate with him and then kill him in their own bed because of what he did to their daughter, was just such an incredible moment. And my hat's off to Lupita Nyong'o. What an amazing actress, and a beautiful actress. Whether people agreed or not with her being cast as Helen is really your problem. Yes, she has flawless skin, and I find her to be a gorgeous woman. And as I said in the beginning, Christopher Nolan has a right to adapt this story however he sees fit. And I don't think in the text it's specified anywhere that she was white, blonde with blue or green eyes. I think she's just described as a stunningly beautiful woman that caused 1,000 ships to go to war. And Lupita is gorgeous to me. I don't know what you guys think, but her acting, not only at the table with Menelaus and that interaction with Telemachus, and then when she hugs him at the end and she says, "Tell your mother I'm sorry for Troy," because she knew all of those events were going to have repercussions, although it really wasn't her fault. But I guess she felt like some of that weight was on her shoulders. But yeah, and then the moment where she's Clytemnestra and she goes for Agamemnon was just incredible. The rage and pain in such a short span of time too, right? Because we really get that as a flashback from Agamemnon talking to Odysseus. She's just so enraged, and you can, but it's the pain too, the pain of a mother losing her child and finally making sure Agamemnon gets his comeuppance, gets what he deserves. Because sacrificing your child just so you can, gain power is such an ass move. It's so horrible. I've never understood throughout history or in texts where that's narrated how a person can ever come to terms with something like that, because it's horrible for any parent to lose their child before one departs, because the natural thing is for a parent to pass on before their child. So for you to do that consciously and sacrifice your child, it's just unnatural to me and unforgivable. And her moment was incredible. I think I also felt that just the story of Odysseus in general, and I feel like it was portrayed very well here, was Odysseus feeling regret and remorse the entire movie. And what got my attention was it's not linear. We kind of start through like the middle of his journey, or I would say even towards the end, where he's just constantly talking to Calypso, and she's back and forth, like letting him and not letting him remember that he has a wife and child that he has to go back to, because as we see later on in the movie towards the end, she'd shared time with him and she thought he was happy, she was happy with him, and she was tricking him and into eating these lotus flowers that would ease his pain, not only physically but mentally, because when he arrived to her, he was a mess. He was completely distraught and in utter physical and emotional, psychological pain. So we kind of go back and forth with their interaction, which was really interesting. And then we start seeing a little bit of the beginning of the journey. It's not linear with the events in Troy either. I found that was really interesting, but it wasn't a mess. It was done in I think a very intelligent manner, because it was building up towards the emotions of the end of the movie. You kind of go on this journey of Odysseus exploring his memories and trying to remembering important moments, like their journey to Polyphemus's cave, who, by the way, I just realized that was not all CG. I mean, clearly it was CG, but it was mocap, and it was played by Mr. Bill Irwin, which I've seen him in other stuff. The portrayal of the Cyclops is something I've never seen before. I've seen Cyclopses in other stories, other iterations, and they're kind of like the regular horizontal eye shape right here on the forehead, and most of them are portrayed like that. Some with hair, some without hair, always large, usually very stocky. But this one was so disturbing, and I wanted to get into that too later on, but the versions of the creatures in this movie are really, really disturbing. There was talk about us taking my young niece to see this movie, but I immediately said no. I said this is not a movie for her, and then my sister was like, I am glad we didn't take her, because she would have been horrified. Not only would she have been heartbroken and inconsolable with the dog dying, but she would not have liked Polyphemus, or the moment with Circe, or the moment with Scylla. Yeah, I think those were really, really, truly horrifying moments. Yeah. So the design of, sorry, I get lost in thought sometimes trying to process like what I remember and just the look of it, because the Cyclops was really weird. It was almost like the nose and the eye were just twisted. I was not expecting to see a vertical eye for the Cyclops, and then as the eye twisted, then it felt like the nose was trying to twist with it. So it was a really interesting design, and whoever came up with that is fucking genius. And then it was a very large Cyclops, of course, but it was a lot slimmer than I thought it would be. And then, when Odysseus makes the mistake of shooting the arrow once they got out of the cave, which was clearly a mistake, because his crew member, what's his name? So many names. Oh yeah, played by Himesh Patel, Eurylochus, I think that's how you pronounce his name. And his crew just starts kind of doubting Odysseus, like the decisions he's making of not burying the crew, although he didn't get a chance to bury, yes, some of the men and you just had to flee. He realizes at the end that's kind of like excuses he's just making that he pays dearly for later on. He ends up alone because he just leaves his men and kind of doesn't listen to their needs. Part of him is torn into being, I think, a leader and a general, but as a leader too, you have to be empathetic. And at some moments, it felt like he wasn't being empathetic towards the needs of the crew members and their wishes and their desires. But then there's also the parallel when we get to Cersei's place, where she exposes them as being greedy men, as never being satisfied with what they have and always wanting more, more, more. So in a way, they were demanding that from Odysseus too. And her moments, Samantha Morton is incredible in everything she does. She just stands out as an actress. Yeah, that moment was grotesque too. I was not expecting them to go all out, although I shouldn't have been surprised since I had already seen the depiction of the Cyclops that it was going to be that way. By the time we got to Scylla and Charybdis, I was like, okay, yeah, this is going to be ugly. It still gave me a jump when Scylla grabbed one of the men. But anyway, I wanted to focus on Cersei, because that moment where she starts turning them into pigs was so gross and so disturbing. I was squinting the whole time and I wanted to look away, but it was one of those things where I couldn't look away because it was so fucking amazing. I was like, oh, this just looks terrible, but my God, it's so good. Just the way she was kind of rubbing them and molding them almost like they were clay and painfully easing them into their new bodies. It was just so gross. It was really grotesque and it was fantastic at the same time. I have no other words to describe that, but just the way she did that and the acting of all the guys there was just incredible. The tense moment between her and Matt when he's starting to realize little by little what's going on around him, when he sees the ring that he gives to Eurylochus, and don't forget this dead man that we left behind. You carry the ring since you're so upset with me that we didn't bury him. He finds the ring and starts realizing that all the animals around her, I'm assuming the tiger, the lion, the panther, they were all people that she turned into animals, because the deer that he shot was a guy too. Pigs, her sister, the crow. Just really, really great tense moments between the two of them. The way she screams at him and she's like, these are your men. You let them come to me. She didn't have any proof of malintent on their behalf, but I guess she had seen so many others that probably did have malintent before, so she just assumed that they were here to do harm. So the way she confronts him right then and there, and she's like, these were your men and you let them come to me. You let them possibly abuse me and take from me. That moment between Cersei and Odysseus is really I would even say Oscar worthy. I know she didn't have a lot of time on screen, but yeah, her moment with him was just amazing. As well as Calypso's interactions with Odysseus. Charlize didn't have a lot of screen time, but the screen time she did have with Matt was really great, because you could see part of her was desperately trying to keep him with her because she thought what they had was good. That she was happy, that he was happy, but she was also torn because as she said, she realized that there was always something pulling him away that he needed to go back to, and it was clearly Penelope. And once he remembers his wife and remembers the pin, there's such a relief on his face, and she's like, yeah, I can't hold on to this man any longer. He doesn't belong to me. I thought that was really powerful and, speaks a lot about her strength too, and making the decision to let him go because he was never hers to begin with. But yeah, the whole entire time, I think what stood out to me throughout the movie was the sense that, and you see it towards the end of the movie with like the flashbacks of Troy. Like, of course, when they present Troy to us in the beginning, it's like, okay, we're setting this whole battle up and we're waiting for the doors to open and let the men know that it's time to come in. And the first time we see Troy, it's him sneaking out of the horse and very stealthily going after the soldiers, right? One by one. But then when you see Troy again and you start realizing that Odysseus is carrying all of this regret on his shoulders for what he did, for having to side with Agamemnon, for giving him the idea in the first place of how to infiltrate Troy, then you realize how it really went down. That it was a lot more men than they showed in the beginning. And that not only were they killing soldiers, they were killing women, right? And then, the beheading of Athena's statue, and that moment when they grab Zendaya and she's just pleading to him, like, don't do this. What are you doing? His shame is really, I think, the core of the story, and the reason why at some moment you realize that maybe he could have gone home sooner, but he didn't, because he had all this remorse, all this shame on his shoulders, so he was ashamed to face his wife and child. And that's really the story of Odysseus. It's more than, yes, it's very entertaining to see, all these mythological creatures, Cyclops, Scylla, Charybdis, and the moment with the giants. That was really cool too. I thought, I'll get into that in a moment. But what I came away with from the movie was the sense that his real journey was coming to terms with the fact that he had to be honest with himself and honest with his family in order to return home. That he wasn't this perfect being and this flawless leader that Ithaca had. He made mistakes, he made poor choices, and now he had to deal with the consequences of that, right? Because ultimately he and Penelope self-exile in order to leave Telemachus as king. Yeah, it's just really a story about coming to terms with your own shame and your own regret, and understanding that you have to be honest with that shame, and that while it won't wash away completely, the burden feels a little bit lighter when you share that shame with the people you love and the people that actually care about you. Because no matter what, Penelope was willing to take him back with everything he'd done. She was like, there's just no way my husband's not gonna like move heaven and hell to come back to me. But he needed to feel, I don't know if okay or better, those are poor choice of words, but he needed to come to terms with what he'd done, with the choice that he'd made to side with Agamemnon, with how he'd failed his men, and how at some point he had to honor the men that he'd left behind and the men that had died throughout the journey. That's why I thought that moment with Hades and all of the fallen soldiers was so powerful. Not only his interaction with Agamemnon, but with Sinon. And Elliot Page, my hat's off to you, because you were so amazing, and people wanted to talk shit and assume that Elliot Page was supposed to be Achilles, which we really didn't see. We didn't see Achilles, but Elliot killed it as Sinon. Sinon was incredible. This small soldier that Odysseus lied to get him to stay with the horse, and his brother lied to him too in order to swap places with him so he could go fight with Odysseus. He was a character that had been lied to the whole time, and even so, he carried just all this strength on his shoulders. And I just love that when Odysseus came back as a beggar, he took his name and said, I'm Sinon, because he was one of the smallest soldiers he had, but he was like, he's one of the bravest. And he really was. So yeah, Elliot's portrayal of Sinon was incredible, and it was a character that I don't know if it was made up for the story. Like I said, I haven't read the whole story of the Odyssey. So I don't know if Christopher Nolan made that character for the movie, or Sinon is actually a character. You guys let me know in the comments if you like. What a portrayal! You acted the hell out of that in that moment, which I think is some sort of I don't think it was hell. I think it was like the entrance to hell, right? Because they were just there on the beach lined up, and yeah, that moment gave me goosebumps when all the soldiers start running down the beach and kind of doing that chant they do and yelling after them, and they're desperately trying to leave the beach and go back to their ships. It was almost like they were clamoring after them, going like, what have you done to us? You've left us behind. It's a lot of shame to carry on your shoulders. Yeah, so what are the moments? Of course, the Scylla and Charybdis moment was great. Like I said, when Scylla started attacking the men, I jumped out of my seat a little bit, because even though I kind of knew that was coming and I was looking at the cliffs, like, okay, where is Scylla going to come out? It was still like, I was like, oh, holy shit, and I felt a lot of people around me kind of do the same thing. And also Scylla, the design for Scylla was incredible. Most of the time we see, this multi-headed dragon kind of creature, and this was just some weird arms with, like, this claw coming out, and then it kind of just went back into a hole in the cliff, almost like a spider. Yeah, that was really disturbing. Like I said, in general, the creature designs were really, really disturbing. Not used to that type of design. What else did I want to? Oh, okay. So the giants, yeah, Lastrygonians, that's what they were. My nephew was like, they looked weird for giants. They didn't really look like giants, because Lastrygonians aren't like your average giants, right? But we were looking at the poster outside in the theater, and Matt Damon was literally like half the size of a Lastrygonian. And from what I understand, most of the portrayals I've seen, they just look like very large Vikings, kind of clumsy. Yeah, they're not conventional giants like we're used to seeing. But I thought the choice of the armor and the kid yelling in the beginning was really, really cool. And I don't know much about the Lastrygonians, but it seems like their expertise is to clearly they live in the woods, and their expertise is to kind of manipulate their surroundings. So the way the trees were moving and turning themselves into like cages and trapping the men so that they could start stabbing them was really cool. I thought the choice to make their armor stand out against Odysseus and his men was really interesting too. Like I said in the beginning, the choice of the costumes was really cool. Like, they made the Trojans look different. Their armor was completely different from Agamemnon and Odysseus and the men. Yeah, I just really love the choices of the costumes. Like I said, the conversation between Odysseus and Penelope at the end. Oh, the setup, the moment where she decides, now that she's aware that Odysseus is home, and she's talking, and she's like, okay, I'm gonna gather the suitors, so finally I can choose who's gonna be my husband. Of course, it was all a ploy to get them to do the test that they were all gonna fail, because the only person capable of shooting that arrow between all the axes was Odysseus himself. So she knew he was there, and you can see her face, her eyes too, through the door when he's still on the steps. And after the woman that's wiping his feet, I thought that moment was so precious too, when she's wiping his feet and sees the scar and realizes that's Odysseus. And he's like, basically, quiet, woman, don't say anything. When Penelope starts realizing that it's her husband, you can see her eyes through the door, like they glisten with tears, and she wants to scream out in joy, but she can't, because she knows that he's come as a beggar for a reason, so he can see what's going on and how to approach the situation carefully so they're not all exiled, especially their son, right? Because clearly, they made a point. You can't just go ahead and burn them all down, even though that's what Penelope wanted to do, because they were all wealthy, popular men from where they came. And if you killed them, their families would come for revenge, and that would pretty much be the end of Ithaca. It would be a problem. So it had to be done in a very intelligent manner. And when they start barring everything up and you get the build up and you see all the men struggle with the bow and arrow because you know they're not going to be able to do it. And just Matt's moment when he's able to like bend the bow and he shoots the arrow through the axes is incredible, man. Rob Pattinson, incredible too. You know, you see his face of like, oh my God, what the fuck? He's back. And, you know, as he starts kind of recoiling and letting all the men fight instead of him, he's such a fucking coward, but he did a really, really good job. I mean, he was a coward from the very beginning because he swapped with his little brother so he wouldn't have to go and made up this whole story about, oh, Odysseus wanting to leave him behind so he could watch over his wife and son. Bullshit. You just didn't want to go to battle because you suck as a warrior, right? And you're just letting everybody fight for you. As that guy, whatever his fucking name is, I did write it down. I think, Melanthius, right? Yeah, he makes that hole in the top where all the weaponry is. So he starts throwing like the spears and the shields. Now he's like, grab the spears, grab the shields, like, fuck out of here. You standing there behind a post letting everyone fight for you. So I love Rob Pattinson. He's great at what he does, but he really did a good job of playing a fucking coward and a loser throughout the movie. Maybe he might say otherwise, because I've heard him in some interviews saying, yeah, you know, no, Antinous meant well, but bullshit, you know your character was a piece of work, and he gets what he deserves in the end, right? Yeah, I thought the end was interesting, because I do know that in the original text of the Odyssey, Odysseus takes over the throne of Ithaca again with Penelope, but I thought it was an interesting choice to just have them self-impose exile, and it makes sense for the story, I think. Maybe some people might argue that, you know, he had no right to change that, blah, 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 but it just made sense that they had just killed all of these suitors and their men and tricked them. So there was going to be issues clearly with the families of these people. So self-imposed exile and finally him sailing off with his wife, which is kind of what she wanted and they had talked about in the beginning before he left, and leaving his son in charge of Ithaca was a wonderful choice. You see his journey, Telemachus' journey, and when he's talking to Menelaus of, you know, there's only one route that I can go, even if my father comes back alive or not. Right? Eventually, I have to become the leader that I was born to be. I have to become the king of Ithaca. So that was his destiny, to take over for his father. So I thought it was a good choice. And before Odysseus left, Penelope and he had discussed about, you know, maybe running away and not dealing with Agamemnon's demands. Like, she was like, why do you have to go away on this journey and there's a possibility you might not come back? You know, you could just say no. You could just turn down his demands. And, you know, Odysseus is like, well, because if I do, he's going to take my son. He's going to take our son away from us. And that is what Agamemnon does. That's what he did, you know. He wanted to be so fucking powerful, he sacrificed his own child, and then he had the audacity to demand other people give up their children, you know, because as we know, he just wanted to take over the world and be the ultimate ruler, as every crazy wannabe madman wants to do. Just every madman's wish of creating an empire, right? Yeah, are there any other important plot moments that stood out to me? I don't know. I think that's it. I think those were all like the great interactions. Yeah, John Bernthal, he was incredible as Menelaus. I thought the conversation between him and Telemachus was pretty important. His scene at the table with Helen, like I said before, was really good. Because I love Lupita's performance, but also John's. I thought, you know, he was also an interesting choice for Menelaus. Well, John Leguizamo, yeah, oh my god. when the guys attacked him at his farm and killed the kid's brother, right, and killed his dogs, that was really horrible. But then I thought the moment that really got my heart was when he realizes that the beggar that he's talking to is actually Odysseus, and he just kind of lets himself go and screams out and just kind of falls to the ground. Like, he's been holding pain and anguish just as much as the dog, right? This whole time. So I feel like when he realizes that's Odysseus, he just kind of releases all of that. So it's like a scream of relief and letting go of all that pain. But I felt that. I felt that moment. It was so beautiful. There are so many beautiful moments in this movie. Not just visually incredible, but it's just emotionally beautiful. It's, I don't know how to describe this. When I left the movie, I just felt full. I felt satisfied. Like, my God, I've just watched a really incredible story that looks incredible, sounds incredible, and the story's been taken on by incredible people. That's it. You might have a different opinion, and maybe another moment stood out to you, or maybe the moments that I talked about were like meh for you. It's okay. We all have our right to our own opinions, but that's what I walked away with, and I would watch it again. Like I said, I downloaded the soundtrack. I told my family last night, hey, I'm probably gonna buy the Blu-ray because I want to see behind the scenes. I want more of this. I want more stories like this, not just about Greek mythology, but stories well written like this that make you feel like you've just witnessed something great. That's what you should walk away with when you go to the movies, right? When you see this on the big screen, you should walk away most of the time, if not all of the time, feeling like that. So anyway, guys, I think I've already talked quite enough. My intention was to make this short, but as usual, when I enjoy something, I have a lot to say and I can go on and on and on. So if there are any moments that I missed that you would like to address, or you have any thoughts regarding this whole piece of art, please feel free to comment down below. I will be putting this video on Patreon, uncut, unedited, and right now the membership is free, so I would love it if you join my Patreon. If not, you can stay here on YouTube. It's fine. I won't be mad. Just don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell, because I am trying to edit as fast as I can, and there's a lot of content coming along, guys. With that said, I will catch you guys on the next video. Take care, everybody. Bye.